This is Tea Earl Grey Hot, an unofficial Star Trek fan podcast from the Other Side Podcast Network. Awakening. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Tea Earl Grey Hot, a Star Trek fan podcast from the Other Side Podcast Network. My name is Yannick, I'm the French guy from Switzerland, and joining me tonight, as always since the beginning of this show, is my friend and co-host Dave. Hello Dave, how are you?
Hi Yannick, yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. What about yourself?
Well, I'm not too bad myself, thank you Dave, except for some technical problems. Maybe we can actually talk about the problems we had last week, because I did some creative editing to try to mask that.
It's got to be said, I noticed it.
Yeah,
and I was
but
there.
You were there. You were there.
It was actually really hilariously funny. I don't know whether anybody else would have picked up on it. I don't know. Do you want to mention what happened?
Yeah, well, my audio crashed, so Dave went on and alone, and then when I came back, I started the recording again, and I just said, "Yeah, I agree with you, Dave." And it turned out that it was actually fitting with everything, so I left that in there.
It seemed to work. And I'd just gone on a complete tangent talking about the search for Spock.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that Yannick had gone. I even said in the recording that Yannick had gone. I thought, oh, no, I'm going to carry it anyway, regardless.
Yeah. Well, that being said, we have a host tonight, so we're going to try and do a proper show because, we have witnesses with us. Today's guest is a mutual friend to Dave and myself. He's the host of Dark Compass, hard rock metal podcast, if I'm not mistaken. And his name is Ro. Welcome, Ro. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me to the show.
You're welcome. Is hard rock metal the right term for your podcast?
Yes, it's hard rock and metal, and everything in between, really. Sort of, there's some death metal, black metal, doom. There's even a little bit of punk in there as well. There is quite a wide variety of hard rock and metal out there, and I try to get those shows out every week.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate that. You were actually the first one to send us feedback on this show.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was right after episode 0 when we talked about is the Kelvin timeline canon or not?
Yes, I think it is. Especially, at the beginning of the Star Trek film, of course, you have the TNG timeline up to the point of the red matter creating the wormhole, whether or not it was to suck it in the supernova to stop it from working, stop the supernova from destroying Romulus, right up to that point. So you do have to have it in there as canon. I mean, there's so many parallels to the original 3, 4, 5, 6 films that are blended into these new ones. You have to. You really do. It's like Discovery as well. Discovery is another one where this Discovery is between, of course, Enterprise, which of course is what we're covering here, and the original series. The first 2 series anyway. So we have to talk about the Vulcans in Discovery as well, surely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're doing a Star Trek show, so we're going to talk about everything Star Trek anyway. So,
well, I was going to say that since that conversation we had originally about whether we should be considering the Kelvin timeline as part of the canon, also whether we were going to review it, we've kind of changed our mind on that, and we will now include that. But we've now ditched Voyager as a result.
You're going to hate this, though. There's a tie-in between Voyager and this episode, which we're going to be covering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Well, you're going to have to tell us about that when right? Because I didn't see it.
Before we go into the review, I also want to point out, not only is Ro the first person to have given us feedback on the show, he's also the first person to have actually requested to be on the show.
Yes, and we have accepted.
We didn't invite you, Ro. You asked us.
I did, yes.
And actually, that means a lot.
Yes, thank you very much.
So, I mean, I've been a diehard Star Trek fan for, ever since I was a child. I used to religiously watch it when I was a kid on television. And as soon as TNG came out, I was in a little bedsit in North Wales with a tiny little black and white television when that first came out on BBC Two. And there I was sort of sitting there, sort of glued.
How did you know which of the extras were going to get killed off?
Extras?
Well, yes, it wasn't usually the red shirts that got killed off. You couldn't tell that on a black and white television.
You can't tell that on a black and white television. No, granted, you can't tell that. No, I was sitting there avidly watching, and everything was all shiny and new and completely different in production and storyline to Star Trek, the original series. It was such a eye-opener, especially for, I suppose, our generation.
Yeah, so dear listeners, if you want to be on the show, you can do just like Ro did. Just contact us, send us an email, or contact us on social media. We will tell you how to do that at the end of this episode. Right after the review of Season 4, Episode 8 of Star Trek Enterprise, Awakening. Okay, so in the teaser for this episode, Soval appears before the Vulcan High Command to answer for his use of a mind meld on Corporal Asquith in sickbay on Enterprise NX-01. Soval states that he needed to conceal his abilities for the best interest of Vulcan. He felt that the service he performed outweighed his crime. Velas states that although Soval's record is impressive, there is no excuse for deception. Soval states that deception is no stranger to the High Command. Velas dismisses Soval from service and orders him to return all confidential material. In addition, Velas reminds Soval that his oath of loyalty is still in effect. When Velas asks Soval if he has something he'd like to say, Soval responds that there is a great deal of things to be said, but no one is willing to listen. And that was a very strong statement from Soval, and he looked like he lost confidence in the High Council.
No, I think that had happened a while back.
Yeah, but
to be fair,
yes, it was really visible on the here. It was tense, and I mean, I was not gonna say. I'm not gonna say he was going to cry, but it was really emotional when he said that.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the worst things that could have happened to Soval, because I think he was aware of what was starting to happen within the High Command. And I even noted at the time, when Velas terminated Soval's position in the High Command, one of the other members, we do find out his name later on, but I can't remember it right at the moment, he kind of did this slow turn towards Velas as he was talking, suggesting that he didn't actually see that coming. It seems to me that decision to dismiss Soval was a one-person decision.
In fact, most of the decisions that Velas does in this episode are his own decisions. There's very little decision-making between the whole council, which concerns me a lot.
The name of the Vulcan you're looking for is Kuvak.
Thank you. I knew it came up later on, but it's further down my notes. Did anybody else feel that the revelation that Stell was a Cyrenite just seemed to be a little bit too convenient?
Yeah.
It seems to me that they've scapegoated Stell, who, bearing in mind he was a privileged member of the High Council at the time, they've scapegoated him to fit the facts that they want to pursue in order to achieve their end goal.
Yeah, I feel this way too. I mean, it's like they tried to put the blame on T'Pau, and when that didn't work, they just used the opportunity to throw him under the bus.
Throw somebody to the wolves at best. I think the T'Pol conspiracy, if you want to call it that, fell very short for Velas, and he wanted to get shot of these Sirenites because if anything happened, if they managed to get out, which was one of the suggestions that the council said, this is later on actually, then of course they could spread their word, and this is not what Valas wanted. So Valas is almost becoming a dictator in a benevolent environment, and that's even in this opening section. You can see that in the way that he's putting himself forward, sort of pushing the rest of the council out the way, and saying to Saval, "That's it. You're out. You're fired." In effect, big pointy finger.
Yes, absolutely.
Mind melds have always been considered an abhorrent act, and I think it probably stems back from the war, which was 1800 years ago. I think mind melds and telepathic manipulation was used an awful lot during that. It's not something which is really mentioned. It's just something that I kind of think I picked up. And so, mind melds and, certainly Catras and things like that have been sort of banished, and over 1800 years it's considered one of the most evil acts that you could possibly do. And so having Saval do it to obtain information and out Stell was brutal in the eyes of an awful lot of people, including the High Council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole situation with the High Council is kind of heading towards your dystopian society, where you've got your dictator overlord, in this case Vlas. You've got the propaganda of the information that Vlas is handing down to his high command that is clearly flawed and clearly based on deception. And I couldn't help aligning, certainly later on in the episode, I've made a note of it later on, aligning the way things were kind of headed, if they weren't going to change, the way things were headed towards almost a communist rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I've got one more thing to say. The teaser gave me my favourite quote of the episode. When Saval said, "There's a great deal that needs to be said, Excellency, but no one is willing to listen."
Yeah.
That's my quote of the week.
Yeah, they can be used in so many contexts, even now in our societies.
I've got another quote later for my quote of the week.
Excellent.
So on Vulcan, the mysterious people who have captured Archer and Tipple in the Tikarath Sanctuary are revealed to be the Serenites under the de facto command of Tipple. Archer, who still believes that Tipple bombed the embassy, angrily confronts her over the death of his friend Admiral Forrest and 40 others. Tipple denies involvement in the bombing and chides Archer for crossing the forge with false information. Tiles joins the group, but Tipple is not too happy to see her mother. Afterward, as Tipple and Archer explain they befriended the late Arev while crossing the desert, they are welcomed with sorrow. As Tipple explained, Arev was in fact Siran, their leader.
I spotted a change in Teles in the greeting of T'Pol in that scene. She changed from saying, "It is agreeable to see that you're all right." She said, "I'm pleased to see that you're all right." Yeah. Which is a very un-Vulcan thing to say.
Yeah, but she's with the Sirenites and...
Absolutely.
That changes a lot of things.
She's revealing her true self there.
Yes.
I found that Archer was still really very angry about the whole thing of the death of Forrest and T'Pau supposedly destroying the embassy. So Syrax Catra, as of course we don't know it's his Catra yet, obviously, but hasn't started to kick in. I mean, you were mentioning in your last episode that he said that he didn't need water and things like that, which was a very Vulcan thing. So there are little elements coming in, but Archer's attitude towards T'Pau at this point is still very Archer, still very human, still very angry and resentful towards the Vulcans. Of course, all this is going to change.
Yeah, but as they mentioned on the previous episode, they didn't have any way to contact them to tell them that Enterprise already knew that T'Pau was not involved in the bombing. So yeah, it was still very, very angry. I thought maybe it was a little too much compared to what we saw until then, but yet, yeah, it's the first time he confronts T'Pau actually. So this might have, bring emotion in Archer. So
T'Pau was also very arrogant towards Archer as well. Sort of saying, "Oh, and you've travelled all the way through the forge during firestorms based on false information." I mean, that's a very Vulcan thing to say, but the inflections that she said it to Archer means you're an idiot.
Yeah, she doesn't like humans very much.
No, certainly not.
And we can see that later in the episode too. Locked in a room at the sanctuary, Archer slumps over near a window. T'Pau goes to his side and asks if he's right. Archer recalls that before RF died, he put his hand on his forehead, and now he feels something inside his head. Archer confides to T'Pau that since the incident, he has not felt like himself. Meanwhile, T'Pau confronts T'Pau's mother over her decision to lead her daughter and Archer to their hiding place with a modified IDIC. She explains that she only wanted to assure her daughter that she was fine. T'Pau regretfully remarks that if Siren is indeed dead, all they have worked for is lost.
Yeah.
That was a very short scene.
Yeah.
There wasn't really very much I could see in that. It's an interesting comment. Of course, all these people are Sirenites, not Serenites, which is so they were following Siren rather than Sirok. The names are all very similar, and you can get sort of you think these would be Sirok Knights or Sirenites following the path of Sirok, but they're following Siran. So having him die, it's like any sort of cult or religious group or something like that when their leader passes away. I mean, it's a really harrowing event for them. And I suppose Vulcans in the 1800 years that they've had to try and suppress their emotions, it would be very hard for them to come to terms with in a lot of ways.
Totally. I mean, they've been following the teachings of somebody who is inhabited by the spirit of somebody from 1800 years ago. So they're going to align themselves closer to the person that's actually there in front of their faces than they are to the spirit of somebody from the dim and distant past. Now, they recognised that it's Sirac that Siren was channeling, but they're still following Siren.
What I found interesting in this scene is that even though Teles joined the Sirenite, she actually didn't share a lot with them because she didn't tell T'Pau that she sent the IDIC, for example. So she's keeping secrets from them, even though, I mean, Kos said that she was a Sirenite, and she probably has been for a while now. And yet she didn't tell that, she was contacting her daughter. So
I wonder if she was being true to her actual beliefs, because in Home, Teles was very, very solid on how she felt about family and the commitment and loyalty to family. So even though she identifies as a Sirenite, her family still comes first.
Yeah, probably, yes. It's a good explanation.
Yeah, I get that too.
Now, I found a goof in that scene.
You did?
I did.
In such a short scene?
In such a short scene, actually, it was kind of the scene before. It was the scene where Archer goes into the cell, effectively, that he's been sat in. He goes and he kind of trips and slumps over near the window. T'Pol goes to his side and asks him if he's all right. And then in that scene, we changed the angle. We're now looking at him from within the room rather than from the window, and you hear him let out a breath, kind of a. But you didn't see it.
Oh,
his mouth was closed.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't notice that either.
Come on,
Okay.
we've been doing this now. This is episode 8.
8. Yes.
Yeah, I do this every week. I will not apologise for it.
No.
No, that's fine. It's
That's
great
fine,
because
yeah.
sometimes, I mean, with the previous episodes, you've mentioned something and I've gone, I'm going to go back and have a look at that. And I have. I've gone back and I just thought,
Yeah.
wow, yeah.
I think I spotted another one later on, but the subtitles on the on Netflix was covering up where the error has occurred, and I couldn't be bothered to switch them off, so I just let it go.
Yeah, it's true that watching those episodes and doing the review now, when I watch something else, I just notice those things, and it's like I have a reflex of telling myself, oh, I need to take a note of that for later, and then I realize that I don't do a review of every show I watch on Netflix, so I don't need to do that. Back on the Enterprise in the captain's ready room, Tucker expresses his disbelief on Soval's expulsion from the High Command. Soval notes that he can file a protest, but Velas is not one to change his mind. Soval remarks that his lost position and future career plans are the last thing they should be concerned with, and asks the commander if they have been able to contact Archer or T'Pol. Trip says that they can't reach them and they can't reach... he says, we can't reach them and they can't reach us. Soval then reveals that Velas is planning on bombarding the Cyranites' sanctuary in the Forge, which is where Archer and T'Pol were headed. Soval remarks that they are in grave danger. I mean, you think like they're in a desert with Cyranite and they're going to be bombarded, so yeah.
Nah, they'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's
They're main characters. It's all right. They'll live.
Yeah, true. They're heroes. They can't die. After some time, T'Pol is brought to her mother. Their discussion goes nowhere, as the daughter can't understand why her mother's joined the people she considers as extremists. Even after she hears Teles' explanation, the High Council's propaganda still holds with T'Pol. Teles explains she didn't tell T'Pol because she wanted to protect her. When Teles tries to apologize, T'Pol says she just wants her mother to come home back with her. Teles dismisses the idea. She goes on to explain that when she gave her daughter the map, she had hopes T'Pol would understand and maybe join her with the Cyranite.
There was a little bit of flavour of that in Home, I thought. There was, because of course that Cuss gave him the edict, but of course you meet Cuss and Telas really for the first time in Home, and you can tell that there is something going on that T'Pol certainly doesn't know.
Yeah, there was something fishy there.
Yeah, there was something fishy there. Of course, it's her being a Cyranite, and of course, again, with Vulcan sensibilities, how can you go and tell your daughter, who's sort of followed the line for the whole of her life, doing what she's been told by the High Council and everybody that she's worked with, that she's a dissident, she's an extremist, even at this point, a terrorist. And in Home, she couldn't admit that. Not yet. And T'Pol, in this, of course, still stating that she's joined a dangerous cult, still makes T'Pol think that she's, again, yes, on the side of the High Council and can't think for herself. Even though throughout the whole of the past 3 seasons of it, she has done. She's fought for herself for a long time. She's even suffered drug addiction and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So she has had a life to lead and had her own decisions. But when it comes to Vulcans and fellow Vulcans, she doesn't know what to do. This is T'Pol, this is. So she gets told by the High Council, by people that are in a higher power, what she needs to do and how she needs to do it. And with her mum telling her, this is my life, this is, what I've done. it's completely alien to her, and that's understandable why this discussion went absolutely nowhere, because T'Pol didn't understand why her mother, in her eyes, from, has been a member of the High Council. She's had, quite high positions and things like that. And here she is giving all that up to change her life to become more than she was expected to be. This is Celeste, and of course T'Pol following in, the path of her mother, just does not get this at all.
Yeah, it was clear. There was no hope for people to join the Serenite.
No, which I found quite interesting, because, as you quite rightly mentioned, Ro, that she has experienced a lot of non-Vulcan experiences in terms of drug addiction. She lost her ability to meditate for a while. She experienced mind melding firsthand, and I wonder if it's those things that have made her resolve to embrace the traditional Vulcan way of life that made it even more difficult for her to accept what her mother was telling her.
Yeah, probably, yeah. In his cell, Captain Archer has a vision. He sees explosions in the far distance, and an elderly Vulcan appears, who said, "The war is taking its toll, Vulcan is tearing itself apart." The man stands at a distance from Archer. Archer asks, "Who are you?" And the man responds, "You know who I am, Captain." Archer quickly deduces that the Vulcan man is Surak himself, the father of Vulcan philosophy. Archer tells Surak that this does not feel like a dream, and Surak tells Archer that he is viewing the past through his own eyes. From what he tells Archer, Siran transferred Surak's Katra to Archer's mind before he died. Surak tells Archer that he must return his people to the right path, and that, to use an Earth expression, they are stuck with each other now. Just then, T'Pol snaps Archer out of his vision. He's stunned and he sits down. I mean, I was expecting that, but it seems like Surak was too casual. I mean, I was expecting something more, a bit of grander to that.
He certainly was. He certainly seemed relaxed talking to Archer.
Like, Vulcan is tearing itself apart. Well, yeah, I thought it was, maybe they could have changed that a bit for the benefit of the scene.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the idea that actually he was talking to Archer in the first place, because if the Katra is an embodiment of who somebody was, then how will that embodiment be able to interact with the host in such a way that they can converse with them and know who they are?
Yeah.
I liken it to somebody shoving a memory stick in someone's ear. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the Katra. It's been inserted into someone's brain. So even if you've got access to that memory stick, the memory stick has no embodiment, it has no life, it has no consciousness, and certainly it would not know anything about the person that it had been inserted into. I'm not really explaining this particularly well.
Yes, you do.
So that's where I'm struggling with this particular scene.
Surak said that he's seeing the scene through his eyes.
Yeah.
How come you have this third party kind of thing going on, or second party thing going on?
Yeah, and Surak is dead, has been dead for hundreds of years. How can he know Archer?
Unless the Katra is, in and of itself, a consciousness.
Yeah.
If it was a consciousness, that what you're doing is you're actually inserting what was left of a human, of a human being, I do apologise, what was left of a Vulcan into another being, then I suppose what you're doing is you're transferring the living essence of that person to someone else so that it can live on. But to the point where it's, I suppose, pushed off to one side.
Yeah, you saw this in Search of Spock, where, of course, Spock inserted himself into McCoy, And it was only a couple of things that rose to the surface, as you were mentioning in the last episode. And then realising that they needed to get Spock or McCoy back to Vulcan for the ceremony. Which
Valtor Pan, I remember that.
Valtor Pan.
Valtor Pan.
That's it.
But McCoy never talked with the Spocks in his head.
Yeah, McCoy never talked to Spock. There was never a scene of them having a dialogue. So it does seem a little off. If there were sort of more things that Archer did which were more like Surak, like even mentioning, his teachings and things like that, that would be a bit more convincing than these visions that he has.
I believe it's a creative way to explain things without having Archer to relive events or things like that. I take that as a creative shortcut to.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right there. It is a creative shortcut.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in the script, of course.
Yes, of course. We are now on Act 2 of this episode. Velas informs the Council that the Cyrenite camp has been located. Velas intends to order its eradication, which prompts objection from another Council member, Kuvak. He proposes simply arresting them when they inevitably need to leave the camp. Velas dismisses this through a goal of maintaining order most of all, which could be obtained by destroying them. Velas ends the meeting with his decision, leaving Kuvak disturbed. Velas seems to have a lot of power. The other seems disturbed, but no one except Kuvak really stands against him. I don't know if he actually has this power or if he's suddenly, giving himself the power and his arguments are almost valid, except that involves killing a lot of people, so that's not acceptable. But he's trying to justify his decisions. And I wonder if the others just they just bought it, or if or if they're scared of him, or I don't know. But
I think it's fear. I do think it's fear that Velas has more power than the rest of the council put together. We have not seen how the council works. I mean, this is the first time we've really seen how the council works in a lot of ways. We just get from previous episodes that, the High Council have decided this and decided that. And we've never gone inside the High Council to find out how the diplomacy or the bureaucracy or whatever it might be works. And we see here it doesn't. It just seems to be the decision of one person. So what does Velas have over everybody else?
In I think it was in the earlier scene when Saval was in the captain's ready room with Tucker. Saval explained that positions on the High Council or positions in Vulcan society are determined by merit. Saval said that Velas was most suited for governing. So he's not necessarily got there through vote, election, whatever. He's got there through his own merits or through the merits that he wanted people to see. Now, I've seen shock amongst the other members of the High Council for some of the things that he's said and that he's done.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
And Kuvak challenges Velas later on in this episode about something he's intending to do. But actually, I've got an idea forming in my head, which is probably so far off the mark that it's just inconceivable, that I wonder whether one of the reasons why he's going after the Cyrenites is because he may be one himself. Bear with me. And he may possess certain telepathic powers that allow him to influence how other people react to what he is doing.
God, that's really stretching it.
I realise that, but if you look at some of the things we've seen in the past, it's not completely beyond the realm of possibility.
Yes, that's
and that's
true.
how he's able to get away with a lot of what he does. Just putting it out there.
Okay, we'll see.
No, but if it's merit that gets him to the position that he is, then there's an awful lot of trust, and so his decisions, much like a captain of a starship, once the decision's been made, that's it. Everybody else has got to follow suit, whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. In Vulcan society, he must have been considered the president. And so he can basically say, we're doing this, and, no matter how much people scream and argue and disagree with him, it happens.
For that exact reason, I don't buy the trust angle.
Yeah, but he would have had some degree of trust. I mean, they say merit to get into that position of power. So once you get into that position of power, you automatically, in a lot of societies, you automatically have the trust of the populace to make the right decisions for the planet in this case.
Okay. I personally, I disagree with that purely on the basis that I don't think anybody necessarily trusts him to do what is right, but I think they're going down the route of having to go along with it because of who he is, not because he's a trustworthy figure.
And them being Vulcan, they will not. They will follow the rules, and they won't challenge him too much.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. So then you get to be a dictator.
Yeah.
Essentially, yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. So, after the strange vision, Archer informs T'Pau and the group about what he saw. He says he thinks it was Surak, and the others believe him. They reveal that Siran possessed the Katra of Surak. He would certainly have tried to transfer the Katra if he had sensed he was about to die. T'Pau offers to mind meld with the captain to be sure, despite her misgivings about doing that with a human. They proceed, and T'Pau sees the desert and the refuge that Archer took earlier, but then she also senses Surak. She steps back now, sure that indeed Surak is in Archer's head.
There was a tiny little bit where T'Pau was saying, I'm seeing somebody, I sense somebody else, and then Archer's eyes just step down just a smidge to look down at T'Pau, and then she steps back as if it almost feels as if at that point Surak had just sort of emerged and then said, hello, it's me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about mind melds, and this one in particular, that if Siran had the Katra and mind melds were commonplace for Siranites to transfer knowledge, sort of like gain understanding and knowledge of each other, then Siran would have been a focal point for, as you were mentioning, Dave, for all these followers to focus on Siran, to be able to mind meld with him, to get insight and understanding from Surak. So for T'Pau to be surprised at this point of having another essence within the mind of a person doesn't quite gel. Because I think mind melds are commonplace within Siranite.
She was not surprised. Well, she was surprised because maybe she didn't believe Archer had the Katra.
But they said they believed him earlier.
You're right.
That's true. I'm gonna have to watch that again for the fourth time.
For having T'Pau to jump back and say, he's got the Katra is, a surprise, not just in that scene, but for her to react like that.
Unless she was surprised by the power of it, how it manifested itself to her in her mind meld.
Yeah.
Well, this one was nothing compared to the next one when she does it the second time. Okay, I've got a geeky remark here, and maybe I'm not gonna make any friends, but I am the only one who thinks that T'Pau looks like an elf from the Lord of the Ring.
No, you are not.
Okay. No.
And, it's been bugging me ever since she appeared in last week's episode. And I thought, do you know what? She reminds me of someone or something, and that is exactly it.
Yes.
With the pointy ears and all.
Exactly. Soval, now determined to prevent the tragedy, helps Tucker with a plan, starting with disrupting one of the satellites near the forge. Tucker asks Soval why he's helping them when he seemed so against humans. Soval reminds him he lived on Earth for 30 years and he did develop a fondness for humans. Tucker says he did a great job hiding it, to which Soval says thank you.
I love this. I love this.
Yes.
This is another brilliant example of when a human throws an insult at a Vulcan and they take it as a compliment. It was in 555, The Final Frontier, when Spock and McCoy and Kirk were around the campfire. And I think they were talking about eating termites or something. And Spock said, as you're so fond of pointing out, Doctor, I am half human. And McCoy says, well, it certainly doesn't show. Spock says, thank you.
I think that's probably a sort of send-off of that scene as well.
There are lots of references to the movies in this series.
So many parallels, yeah.
Yeah. Back on the surface in the Cyranate's brig, actually, they are where they are held. T'Pol tells Archer about the Catric arcs that were discovered near Pegem a few hundred years ago, before, she said, I think, allegedly used to preserve Catras. And upon study, it was concluded they did nothing of the sort. T'Pol says it's more likely Archer has Cyran's memories, transferred before he died. Archer feels like it's more than that the monastery feels like home. T'Pol objects that Cyran spent a lot of time here, and Archer says that whatever it is Cyran put in his head, he wants it taken out.
So here is my second favourite line from the episode.
Me too.
Where Archer refers to the feeling of pressure he had in his head as a mind meld hangover.
Yeah.
Such a human reaction, the human response to it.
My remark here is, that's got to hurt.
Yeah, definitely.
Later, Tucker gets a hail from Vlas, who inform him the investigation is complete and that they can go back to Earth. Tucker wants to stay, but Vlas is insistent, having even called Admiral Gardner. He wishes Enterprise a pleasant journey and hangs up on them, and Tucker is not pleased.
There's a hint of sarcasm in that voice, Vlas, at the end of that.
Yeah.
So, have a pleasant journey.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, it sort of sticks it to him. And throughout this whole episode, you can tell that Vlas is gradually getting angrier and angrier towards the humans. Then they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be allowed to do this. And you could almost imagine him blowing his top after that communication. You could imagine him running around his office kicking his furniture.
Yeah, it reminded me of the augments of Yannick getting gradually hungry at Tsung.
Yes. So Vlas's behaviour here is incredibly childish. Because, and I've noticed it, I think it was in Act 4 I wrote this note down, but I'll mention it now because it's very relevant, is that pretty much from this point onwards, any time he communicates with Enterprise, he will say something and then hang up immediately.
Yeah.
I think there was one particular scene where they opened the channel, he spoke, and then hung up. Yeah. So he's not giving any opportunity for dialogue, for discussion, for negotiation at all. He's being incredibly childish.
Yeah, and I noticed that Tucker swears on the bridge of Enterprise, and I mean it's not completely out of his character, but it's surprising for a Star Trek episode to have a swearing in there.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. I think it was the same phrase we mentioned a few episodes ago. Actually, I think it was Tucker that said it then as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. T'Pau plans a dangerous ritual to transfer Surak's Catra from Archer. Tiles objects to her since she's never performed it before, and it may not be what Surak or Cyran would have wanted. T'Pau says Cyran didn't choose Archer for the Catra. He was dying and needed to save his Catra, and T'Pau was nowhere near. Tiles asks her one last time to reconsider, as Archer could die. but she doesn't. Tipo doesn't reconsider, unwilling to follow Archer or sacrifice the Catra.
This is the needs of the many again. It keeps coming back.
And the fact that Tipo doesn't have a lot of consideration for Archer's life or any humans, actually, for that matter.
But again, I think this is the whole. It's the greater good. They're doing this for the greater good. They're doing this for. No, you could argue it's Cyranites, not Vulcans, but it's for multiple people, not just the one person. Yes, Archer could die, but actually the benefit of that will be for multiple people.
Okay.
You could also argue that with Velas's actions as well. I mean, he believes that he is doing things for the greater good. He's being told that it's the Cyranites that was doing it. So he is firmly convinced that the Cyranites need to be destroyed, need to be wiped out. And that might just be a logical thing. Not because they could get hold of them and recondition them and things like that. A lot of Vulcan logic is zeros and ones. You know, you sort of, if you need something done, you do it. Or, you know, if it causes this, then you deal with it in a different way. This seems to be the most logical way that Velas thinks that he can deal with the Cyranites in one foul swoop. I mean, he wasn't considering that there were Cyranites in other places. They could well have been. I mean, it's a big planet.
Yeah. But they're all in the forge. So we're now on Act 3 of this episode. We're back in the cell where T'Pol is still dueling on her mother's choice to join the Cyranites. Archer talks to her, noting Tiles is alright and that he doesn't think these people are responsible for the bombing anymore. Before they can continue, T'Pol enters the cell, announcing she's decided to take the Catra from Archer. Archer agrees, as he's eager to get Surak's Catra out of his mind, but T'Pol objects when they note the danger to him. T'Pol says they will use force if needed, which prompts further objection from T'Pol, throwing a glare at Tiles. Here's my third preferred quote of the episode, when Archer tells T'Pol that he's got something in his head, but he said, "I don't feel half as bad as you look." I mean, it's a good way to start a conversation with someone, especially when you want to help her go better because she's dueling on her mother's choices. I mean, it was. I like this quote. It was great.
This cements T'Pol's belief that they are a violent cult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're going to try and force this out of him, whether he wants to or not. I know that he does. I mean, he's agreeing with it there.
He seemed quite willing.
Yeah. But it doesn't stop T'Pol thinking that, these people certainly are against the way that Vulcan life is.
That doesn't help Stargaze now.
No, certainly not.
In the meantime, Admiral Gardner has ordered Enterprise to leave Vulcan and come back home. Trip has no intention of complying with that order until the captain and T'Pol are back on board. Travis is done working on a shuttle that he retrofitted, and Trip sends them down. Vilas finds out that the Enterprise is still in orbit, and Kuvas is further alarmed at Vilas' behavior, as he is obviously monitoring their communications and using Gardner to get rid of witnesses. Vilas ignores it and deduces that Tucker has a plan and goes to find out what it is. We're back on Vulcan, where the ritual is going to take place. Archer kneels down before T'Pol for her to perform the ritual. He goes back to the place with Surak, who is now suffering from radiation poisoning from the fallout of Vulcan's war. Surak, interestingly, decides to stay with Archer, saying Siran wasn't able to help him. In fact, no Vulcan can. Archer, being human, isn't burdened by his people's history. He falls, insisting that the captain must find the long-lost Kirshara, so the Vulcan people can find a new path of enlightenment. T'Pol senses that Surak wants to stay inside Archer, and, stunned, releases him. Now that's I have the same problem with this scene as with the previous one. I mean, it just looked strange, and it just he's almost dying, but he's casual about it. I mean, I don't know if you guys picked that up.
Yeah, it was just something that sort of last-ditch attempt kind of thing. And yeah, they needed to explain what the Kishara was a bit more, I thought. So find the Kishara. Well, what the hell's the Kishara? It's not been mentioned anywhere in the episode so far. So what is it? Is it another one of these Idix?
You'll have to wait until next week's episode to determine that one.
Again, it was, as you so rightly said, it's a shortcut to try and explain an awful lot more than that could be explained by Archer pretending to be Sirac. There's one thing that I did hear in this scene was thunder in the background, which was a little bit strange, seeming as you had the firestorm in the previous episode, but you had thunder and things like this happening during the ritual. So go back and watch it again.
Was it thunder or was it explosions?
Bombarding.
Yeah.
No, it was thunder. They hadn't started bombing or anything at that point.
That's true.
So for sort of effect, I guess, was when she started the ritual, there was thunder in the background, as if something or someone or was angry at the whole thing. There was just this flavour in that scene going on that it was wrong.
I suppose it could have been the lack of stability in the forge, maybe.
Yeah,
because it's a very unstable part of Vulcan.
Maybe.
I don't know.
No.
The language that T'Pau used, I'm sure there was a bit of Polish in there. I was just trying to find out some specific words. I'm sure there is a Vulcan to English dictionary somewhere, and I'm sure a lot of it makes sense. But it sounded Polish in some parts, I thought.
Well, I assume Vulcan is an actual language in the same way that Klingon is.
Yeah, of course, yes.
So there's the Vulcan Institute somewhere?
Yeah, probably. The Vulcan Language Institute. I think the Klingon Language Institute was the first website I ever went to.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that, yeah. Right, we're back on the Enterprise. And Soval disables the satellite, giving Mayweather 6 minutes to get to the surface. Reed and Hoods ride on a very bumpy ride. Soon, unfortunately, 2 Vulcan patrol craft fire on them. Reed is able to fire back, but the shuttle loses part of its wing and is forced to return to Enterprise. Soval surmises that they must have been monitored, and sure enough, Vlas hails them and demands to know why they're sending a shuttle. Tucker is then forced to admit Archer is on the surface. Soval admits he helped by giving Tucker the code to the satellites. Tucker receives a direct order from Vlas to leave or be fired upon. I was glad to see that in this episode, Travis does the famous Maverick maneuver to get the Vulcan ship. He pulls the air brake and they go in front of him. That was nice. We talk about that for the ships getting out of warp, and that that never worked for the warp. But for a shuttle, it works. So that's good to know.
And they had to fire the old school chemical rockets to be able to get back into orbit.
I wonder how a shuttle pod can fly with part of its wing being destroyed, but why not? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Why not? Why not? It's the 90% again.
Exactly.
Well, Mayweather is a very accomplished pilot.
Absolutely,
he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and
so I'm sure he can fly a shuttle with only one wing.
Yeah. Let's say they were not completely in the atmosphere, so they were still in spacecraft mode, even though they had to fire the fuel rocket. That gave them enough push to fly back to the Enterprise, or I don't know.
Why would a shuttle pod need
wings?
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Oh, I suppose in a planet's atmosphere, it needs to stay upright, doesn't it?
No.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not an expert.
Well, none of us are. I have got a series observation, and I'm surprised it's taking me this long to mention it. Malcolm always calls her to Paul, not to Paul.
Yeah, but he's British.
I find that remark offensive.
I feel I'm in minority here.
No, it's an interesting one. I've never worked out why. He's done it since season 1. It could be a British thing. It could be a character thing. I don't know. But he's the only one out of anybody that ever has any interaction or whatever with T'Pol to call her to Paul.
Well,
that's interesting. I hadn't noticed that, but now you've mentioned it. Yeah, that has been throughout all 4 seasons. And yeah, it might just be him, his colloquialism. I mean, he didn't actually... Does it mention where Reed was from?
I don't remember now.
In the UK? I think there is a mention of where he's from originally in Britain.
Maybe the actor just made a mistake the first time and they decided to keep it.
And
kept
stuck
it.
with it, yeah. Yeah, that's probably the reason.
They say, oh no, that's good, keep it doing like that. Right, so we are now on Act 4, final act of this episode. Archer is unconscious for 3 hours after the procedure, under T'Pol's care. Tiles comes to check on her, but she coldly says she wants nothing to do with her mother. Archer wakes up feeling like not very well. He sees the entrance of a cave and he thinks the Kirshara is in there. But T'Pol reports that 3 Vulcan cruisers were spotted over the forge and that they should begin evacuating.
And this is the point where Archer says he thinks he can find it.
Yes.
So, and this is something that I thought, this is the reason why Sirac picked Archer. Because he's firstly a leader and can make decisions himself. Remember I was mentioning about T'Pol not making really decisions and towing the line with other Vulcans? This is the reason why Sirac picked Archer rather than T'Pol. Because once a higher up person, Vulcan person, makes a decision, everybody toes the line. Well, much like everybody else, but humans, and especially in Archer's terms, he would not necessarily follow the decision that other Vulcans have made. So if T'Pol had Sirac's cutter, she would have just followed T'Pau out of the forge and that would have been it. They would not find the Shikara. The reason why Sirac is with Archer is because he can make firm decisions outside of the mindset of Vulcans.
He's also the highest ranking non-Vulcan.
Yeah, and he has a tendency to do exactly the opposite of what the Vulcan says.
Yeah.
Now, Archer says in this scene that he feels like he just pulled his head out of a plasma relay. How the heck can he know what that feels like? I mean, that's one
even worse than a Vulcan mind meld hangover. Obviously.
Yeah, probably.
I had to cringe at that particular statement because I know that they've been in space for 4 and a bit years, whatever it is they're up to at the moment. But it does seem as though whenever they make these similes, these kind of analogies, they always relate them to some part of a starship.
Yeah.
Not like he's just pulled his head out of a cow's backside, or he's pulled his head out of a shark, a shark's mouth. It's a plasma relay. Now, us as viewers of the program from the outside. Has anybody actually seen a plasma relay? Does anybody know what a plasma relay looks like?
Hold on. No, sorry, I've lost mine.
For the benefit of the tape, Yannick was actually looking around to see if he had one. It's something
anybody's mentioned.
If you can't relate to it, what meaning is it going to have to somebody, watching this?
Well, the interpretation is left to the audience discretion. I mean, you can just imagine. I mean, when he says pulling his head out of a plasma relay, I imagine that should be very uncomfortable, just because there's plasma in there and
sort of sparks and lightning going all around his head. Not necessarily going through his head, but around.
No. Yeah. But you're going to get somebody, some absolute weakling who's going to be going, "Oh wow, that must be really, really bad," and you're going to get someone with false bravado going, "Oh, a plasma relay, that's nothing. I had my head in a port injector yesterday."
On the port injector,
those self-sealing stem bolts were really painful.
Yes, a port injector is a thing. It's like, did you only have 5 pints last night? I had 26. I didn't, by the way.
Meanwhile, the Vulcan ships fire some warning shots toward Enterprise. Vilas hails the crew, stating he's running out of patience. On Vulcan, Kuvak objects that Vulcan and Earth has been allies for 100 years, but Vilas doesn't want to give the Serenite an opportunity to get out of the forge. So he gives order to remove Enterprise out of orbit. 3 Vulcan ships approach Enterprise and they begin firing. In the monastery, Tiles leads the evacuation, but Archer, T'Pau, and T'Pol remain behind to attempt to locate the Kirshara. No match for the Vulcan ships, the Enterprise is heavily damaged, and Tucker finally withdraws under Soval's advice to retreat. As soon as the humans are away, Velas orders bombardment of the sanctuary. From the moment he asks Trip to leave orbit, and the moment that he orders to fire on the on Enterprise and then bombard the sanctuary, it seemed to me that he lost patience completely, and he said, "Okay, so just get on with it, remove them from orbit, bombard everything, and let's finish with this thing." There was a sense of urgency in his decisions, I believed.
I'd call it desperation, not urgency.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
He was at the end of his tether now. Whatever needs to happen now.
Yeah, so probably, we have a revelation at the end of this episode, but probably that thing is moving on, and something is gonna have to happen soon. So.
Well, he was saying that he was witnessing a massacre.
Yeah.
And Falas says, "No, I'm just eliminating a threat," which certainly does sound. I'm going to take no BS from anybody. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, and so again, Falas being typically un-Vulcan, you can definitely definitely hear the anger in his voice, the forthrightness. I know that Vulcans can be forthright with their logic and their unemotion, but Velas seems to have lost it, really, at this point.
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it.
Back in the forge, Archer leads the group down a corridor. He finds the mummified corpse of Tikelas, one of Surak's students. T'Pol expresses surprise as Archer's identification of the master, as there is no inscription anywhere. Archer doesn't respond. They continue on as the bombardment starts, and soon Archer opens the door to the room where the Kirshara is kept. T'Pol is stunned to see it, as she almost believed it didn't exist. A stronger blast prompts them to leave immediately. Archer leaves them out of the sanctuary, which has been reduced to rubble. At the Vulcan Council, Velas is pleased to hear the destruction of the monastery and orders troops to search and kill survivors. Kuvak notes Velas is ordering a massacre, but Velas insists that they are limiting a threat, and that's what you just said, Ro.
Yeah.
Velas is channeling Malik at this point.
Yes, he's very Malik, yes.
Also, did anybody realise or notice that there was a huge fire risk as Archer was walking through these corridors with this incredible flaming torch, and he was pushing what I presume to be cobwebs and the like out of the way. And I think the flame actually caught some of them, and they kind of fizzled away. But the risk of fire there was quite bad. Yeah. Somebody should lose their job for that.
It's interesting for him to mention the first Kolinar master, because Kolinar is quite a real big thing in Vulcan society. It's the whole ritual of purging your emotions.
Absolutely.
And it's certainly something that seems to have been lost, whether there are now no more real Kholinar masters or whether Kholinar masters were quite commonplace back sort of 1800 years after the war, and when Surak's teachings were starting to come into play, whether there was a lot of Kholinar masters to try and temper these emotions, and they seem to have almost completely disappeared, or have disappeared off into these different places like P'Jem. And for the population of Vulcan, there can't be all that many Kholinar masters or Kholinar schools or anything like that. I mean, even it wouldn't have been In Search of Spock, it would have now then been the one after that, Journey Home. Spock was going through the Kholinar, and he cut it short so he could then travel back with the crew back to Earth. And the same happened again somewhere else. Some other Vulcan cut his Kholinar training short. I can't remember which Vulcan it was now. But anyway, that kind of shows that there must have been a huge demand for these Kholinar masters. And it just seems like there isn't very many of them anymore. And so attitudes and emotions and things slowly build up, just as we've seen in Valas throughout this episode. He needs a Kholinar master.
Yeah.
That's what he needs.
Yes.
And it just feels that he's not, or at least did it when he was at a young age, and it just seems to have worn off. So yeah, it's interesting that he mentions Kholinar at this point.
And yet another reference to the movies with
yes,
what you just said about Spock, doing his Kholinar. Did anyone notice that the Kirshara actually? That's my I pick on the episode part. The Kirshara seems made of cardboard once again.
You said that about the whatever it was in last week's episode.
Yeah, I mean, what's with Star Trek and stones? I mean, everything that needs to be stones really looks bad on pretty much every episode.
And yet the Idic that Teles sent to Pol actually looked quite authentic. The amulet.
Yeah, but it was not made of stone. So.
Budgetary constraints, I presume.
Probably. In the remains of the sanctuary, T'Pol finds her mother, Teles, gravely injured, and she holds her in her arms. Teles remains behind, as she was afraid T'Pol was still inside, and indeed she was. Teles admits that she came to the sanctuary to help T'Pol, as she has always struggled with her emotions. When T'Pol says she doesn't understand, Teles responds, "You will." And I have to admit that I didn't understand either, so I hope I will in a later episode. While Archer and T'Pol look on, Teles dies just after she tells T'Pol she has always been so proud of her. T'Pol cradles her mother's lifeless body in her arms and shed a tear.
Yes, that was quite an open show of emotion from T'Pol there. But I would challenge anyone, even a Kholinar master, to not show that kind of emotion if a close family member died.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. We know that Vulcan actually feel pain and sadness. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. When they picked up the Kishara and the first explosion happened that actually reached them, they got out of the little cavern that the Kishara was in, and they moved away from that place, and then they found Teles. But that was a path that she would have had to have taken to get to where she was, which means she would have walked past the sealed cavern.
Yeah, and the exit seems to be a lot shorter route than the entrance through the catacombs, through where all the corpses were.
The distance to the sanctuary seemed quite a way away.
Yeah, a short route and far away from the sanctuary, because when they get out, they actually see the sanctuary below, quite far away. Yeah. Maybe something strange here.
Timey-wimey.
Yeah. Finally, the last scene of this episode, Commodore Tucker is in command of the Enterprise, still moving away from Vulcan. Privately, Soval, who is still on board, informs Tucker in Archer's ready room of another threat. Vulcan is planning to attack Andoria, believing that they are developing a weapon based on Xindi technology. Vlas is advancing an agenda and wanted the Cyberknights eliminated due to their pacifist views. Tucker knows what he must do, immediately leaving and ordering that Anson Mayweather set a course to Andoria at maximum warp to the surprise of the bridge crew. And to be continued next week.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun,
The
indeed.
bloody Xindi. I thought we got rid of the Xindi. I thought the Xindi were out of it now.
This blends off from an episode where the Andorians came and rescued the Enterprise after they had discovered where the prototype little version of the
sphere.
main weapon, the sphere.
Yeah.
And of course, that episode is they work together with Shran, of course, being the Andorian. Everybody knows who Shran is, I'm sure.
We call him the blue guy.
The blue guy. Oh, Shran. I love the actor who plays Shran.
Yes,
he's in
great.
so many episodes and plays so many different characters.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So, of course, Shran and Archer, they managed to get hold of the sphere prototype, don't they? And in the episode, the Andorians try and take it away and run off with it. But of course, that inevitably fails because Archer's found the arming codes for it and actually starts its countdown in the cargo bay of Shran's ship. So he has to dump it before exploding. So there's false information coming from somewhere to Vulcan High Command. And so Vlas is making ill-conceived decisions about this, that, and the other. And of course, this decision to start a preemptive attack on Andoria. But that's not to say that surely the Andorians actually did their own scans and things like that of the Xindi weapon. So there might be some slight truths in it.
Yeah.
I guess you'll find out in the next
Exactly.
episode.
We'll find out next week.
You know, I said that there is a link between Voyager and this episode.
Yes.
Yes.
This episode was directed by Roxanne Dawson,
Why do I know that name?
who played B'Elanna Torres in in Voyager. And this
I
was
knew the name.
and this was her 10th directorial part of Enterprise. So she did 10 episodes. I'm not entirely sure which one. So this was the last one that she did for Voyager. But being a director, you know, this is not her first, of course. This is her 10th directorial experience. But
Okay.
yeah, it's a great accomplishment, I thought.
Oh, interesting. Definitely. Cool.
So there's your link between Enterprise and Voyager. A bit of a terse one, but there you go.
A link's a link.
And that concludes our review of Star Trek Enterprise Season 4 Episode 8, Awakening.
In the last week, CBS have issued a new trailer for the forthcoming, the forthcoming series of Star Trek Picard. Have you guys seen the new trailer?
Of course.
Yes, of course. It's been bounded around Twitter for days. So, I mean, yes, of course, I've seen it. Yeah.
I was a bit narked when it was first released because I first got it on as an alert through Memory Alpha. And then I clicked on the link. It said, "This video cannot be displayed in your location." So,
Yeah, I had the same.
So it wasn't until somebody pointed me towards Patrick Stewart's Twitter, and he had the trailer on there. What did you make of it?
I liked that it's actually a trailer where you learn you get to see the characters. I mean, on the first one, it was short clips. We saw Borgs, we saw Romulans, but there was nothing really clear. It was just like the mood of the series. In this one, you can actually see characters. I mean, you get to see Data, Riker, Troy, and some of the new ones. And forgot the name. I'm sorry for you guys, but I will learn that in time. And it was, to me, it was more of a trailer than the first one. The first one was like just to tease. This one was really something that now we have something to expect from the series.
You certainly see more of the characters, definitely, and certainly the Data's part in it certainly seems like a dream sequence or something like that.
Definitely.
Which might be well interesting. And of course, 7 of 9 kicking ass with 2 phaser rifles, one in each hand, blowing away everything. I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
Someone said on Twitter that if 7 of 9 was coming at him with 2 phasers like that, he would let her kill him and then he would die happy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this Romulan Borg thing is going on. Yeah. I was looking at the numbers. There's a number on the Borg cube saying 6,900 and something odd days since the last assimilation. And working that back, that is 25 years. And you think about this is 25 years after Picard has retired. He's gone and done this heroic thing that we don't quite strictly know what's going on. We kind of surmise that it might be the evacuation of Romulus, which stems to the Kelvin canon. So there is that. You have to accept that there are parts of Kelvin canon even in this. So what is the Romulan Borg thing going on, and why is it blue, not green? Because Romulans is usually green power sources, Klingons being red, humans being blue.
I didn't notice that.
If you look at all the ships, all the starships, you know that there are, certainly different colours.
Yeah.
So there's this blue element inside of the Borg cube. So it would be interesting to see why that's blue and not green.
Yeah, absolutely.
Romulans have always been green.
Yeah, interesting. The dream sequence you mentioned with Data, very intrigued by the exchange where Data hands Picard a paintbrush and says, "You can finish this." And Picard says, "But I don't know how." I didn't understand what that meant.
No, but maybe we were not supposed to understand.
No, nobody quite knows.
Maybe not. It's a little bit of intrigue.
Yeah.
Did you actually see the wedding invitation that was distributed around by Gates McFadden on her Twitter?
No.
There's an image of Picard and Beverly's wedding invitation.
Oh, no, I didn't see that. So Dr. Beverly Crusher Picard?
So there is also this thought of this girl that appears and says, you have to help me, and I know that I'm safe with you. There's rumours that that's his daughter.
Yeah, there was rumor too that she might be the Borg Queen's daughter.
Yep, there's that one too.
So.
And there are a few images in this trailer which suggest that the Borg Queen is there, or parts of the Borg Queen are there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And
still all speculation, of course.
Yeah,
of course, yeah.
And in the first trailer, Picard seemed to I was going to say no, but he seems to maybe guess who she is when he says, if she's who I think she is, she's in grave danger. So he probably has an idea of who she is. But we don't. We're going to have to wait. But we know when we're going to have an answer, don't we, Dave?
We do. And this is going to be absolutely fantastic. The series will premiere in the US on CBS All Access on January the 23rd, 2020. It will then be followed up within 24 hours, so they say, on or around the 24th of January 2020 on Prime Video.
Yeah, and Prime Video France confirmed that they're going to have Picard on the 24th. So, yay!
Yeah, well, we weren't sure whether that would be the case, so I did some digging, and apparently it's going to be in over 200 countries on Prime Video, which is really good news because there are just over 200 countries in the world.
Yeah. So
I think it's probably fair to assume that wherever you are, as long as you get Prime Video, you will get Star Trek Picard.
Yeah.
That's the first time I know of a series that's released outside of the US less than 24 hours after the release in the US. So I don't know if it's something that usually happens with Netflix and Prime Video.
There's been a couple. Breaking Bad was on Netflix within a day after it was broadcast.
Okay.
And Star Trek Discovery was another one.
Of course, yes.
Which was on Netflix a day after it was broadcast on NBC Universal? CBS?
CBS.
I would imagine CBS.
Yeah.
But there have been other non-streaming services like subscription cable services and such like that programs have come out within 24 hours of the US original showing. And in fact, there are a couple of examples where they've actually come out on the same day.
Do you think that's a way to avoid piracy? That to avoid that, someone just records the show in the US and puts it in the on the internet.
It certainly was one of the major causes of piracy, was the fact that the US would get certain TV shows up to 6 months prior to anywhere else in the world getting them, and that's still, I would say, that's probably the case still now, because we're watching Young Sheldon, which is the spin-off from Big Bang Theory, that started in the US on the 26th of September. But we're not going to get it in this country, in the UK, until I think the 11th, which at the time of the recording is 2 days away. So that's a couple of weeks after. And yet series 1 and 2 of Young Sheldon, I think we got significantly quicker. I think almost aligned with the US release.
And not everybody's got Prime either. I mean, you're going to find people who are going to pirate it anyway. I mean, yes, of course, having these streaming services does lower the piracy, but as a lot of people are now finding out, is that an awful lot of people are starting their own streaming services, much like, say, Disney. You've now got Disney, Netflix, HBO, CBS has their own one, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Stars, and all this lot. And every one of those subscriptions are between $5 and $10 a piece. So all this cable cutting business that people were doing 5 years ago and saving money because they're not paying $100 cable fee are now paying $100 a month for all these streaming services. So people are having to cherry pick what they want and how they want it. So there still is going to be piracy.
Yeah, but this is exactly why they're doing it, and it works. It works every single time, because we've been watching Discovery on Netflix. Now, Netflix, we already had a subscription to anyway, so that really wasn't an issue. Picard is going to be on Amazon Prime. Now, it turns out we already had Amazon Prime, so again, wasn't necessarily an issue. However, because of the subscription models of these individual services, you can jump in and jump out as you see fit with no penalty, as long as you're paying monthly. Now, we pay for Prime because there are multiple benefits to having Prime, not just Prime Video. We pay for that annually because it's significantly cheaper. But if you're not an Amazon Prime customer and you want to watch Star Trek Picard, I think there's not many episodes in the series. Is that 12 or 13?
10.
It's 10.
It'll be 10.
Right.
Yeah.
All you have to do is sign up for Amazon Prime for 3 months and then cancel it for no penalty. So you're paying 3 months worth of Amazon Prime. And then when Discovery Season 3 starts up again, if you're not already a subscriber for Netflix, you subscribe to Netflix for 3-4 months, however long the series is going to be. So actually it doesn't work out that bad, because you don't necessarily have to do these concurrently. It really depends on what your viewing habits are, what series there are.
True.
But things like Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, they are desirable series. They're the kind of series that diehard fans are always going to chase after. And the production companies, they know this. So for those in America that have access to CBS All Access, they've got it great because you can just stay on there and you'll get all the Star Trek stuff. It doesn't matter. But what's to say that in, I don't know, when the Section 31 spin-off comes along, they're not going to stick that onto, I can't think of any other streaming services, but if they stick it onto another service just because they can.
Yeah, but those series are on Netflix or Prime because I believe Netflix and Prime actually participate in the development of the series. I'm not sure any other streaming service would invest money in the series in the first place.
And of course, Netflix and Amazon, they have money to burn. They are so cash rich.
Yeah.
So they can afford to bid for these things. Although I did hear somewhere that doesn't CBS have a stake in Amazon or Prime Video or something? I think that's one of the reasons why they released it on this one. I can't remember where I heard that. Or does Amazon own part of CBS or something? There is something there. It's more than just a strategic agreement. There's something more between CBS and Amazon, I think. Don't quote me, but I think that's the reason why they've done it that way.
Yeah, I must admit that I actually cancelled my Prime subscription for 2 years. I had the free month, and had it and paid for a year for it, whilst Vikings was on. Vikings, it's fantastic. If you get a chance to see it, watch it. It's brilliant. And then when Preacher's another series, which is really good. Very adult, it's certainly not PG-13 or whatever Star Trek is. That stopped for quite a while. And as soon as those two finished, I cancelled my subscription and then rejoined it fairly recently after almost 2 years. Of course, I didn't get my free month back or anything, but I was able to jump in and catch up and watch what I wanted as and when.
Yeah, it works pretty well.
What was the reason why I got back to Prime? The Boys. The Boys was all about superheroes and corrupt superheroes, which was really quite fun. Episodes. Yeah, it's well worth keeping going. Of course, there is a link between The Boys and Star Trek as well, and that's Carl Urban, who of course plays McCoy in Star Trek.
I need to correct myself from what I said earlier on. I was confusing the relationship between Amazon and CBS with that of Fox and Hulu. Because Season 3 of The Orville, which we've mentioned before, and actually The Orville does have a link to Star Trek Enterprise because Brannon Braga, who was one of the showrunners on Enterprise, also was a showrunner on
There's been a number of actors who have been in The Orville as well, who have been on Star Trek.
John Billingsley was in The Orville.
Yeah.
You watched The Orville, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So there was an episode when we went to... Oh, do you know what? I've forgotten her name now. The security chief. They went back to her home planet and their family was visited by another couple that lived down the bay, and that was John Billingsley, who plays Phlox. Yes,
and of course, the security officer's father plays the Doctor in Voyager.
Yes, that was the other one.
Picardo.
Richard Picardo, yeah, that's it. Yeah, he plays his mother, his father, her father, brother. Oh.
Anyway, don't get me started on The Orville because I could talk for hours on that. So yeah, keep an eye out on the 23rd, 24th of January next year.
Yay! I haven't been so excited for a Star Trek series since probably never.
See, I didn't have that big build-up for Discovery. I heard that Discovery was about to start, so I started watching it. Whereas this, we've had at least 6 months of warning of this, and it's so hotly anticipated. It better deliver. I'm sure it will do, but it has to.
Oh, yeah. This is the thing. I mean, with that, there's in that. We're going back to the trailer again. it's not Picard's Starfleet anymore. Things have changed since the Dominion War. There's more. I wouldn't say there was an awful lot of diplomacy and tolerance and things like that during TNG, but it feels like because of the Dominion and the dynamics post DS9, Starfleet has changed. Hence the reason why Section 31 has been penciled in, because that was a very important part of DS9.
We're gonna see our good old friends, the actors from TNG, and I hope that we know they got older, but I really hope that they're gonna deliver, as you said, Dave, because it might be a shock to see them as they are now. I mean, we occasionally see Jonathan Frakes in some movies and some series, but the others are maybe not exactly as we remember them.
Well, I mean, we said that about Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
When we first discussed that, but also looking at Jonathan Frakes in the trailer, he's getting older.
Yeah.
Marina Sirtis, she looks as young as she always did do, but Jonathan Frakes, he looks older.
We're talking 30 plus years.
I know.
I mean,
it's scary.
if you look at pictures of you 30 years ago, I mean, you did change too. We all did.
I actually have pictures of me 30 years ago, and just no. No. Anyway, I think before we close off, I think we should expose Ro to the ongoing wonder that is the quickfire questions.
Absolutely.
Right, I'm ready. Come on, throw them.
You know the rules?
Sure.
Right, okay. Here we go. Favourite series?
TNG.
Yeah.
Seems to be a definite favourite, that one. Favourite film?
6, Undiscovered Country.
Again, that's a common one as well.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Favourite ship?
The Defiant from DS9.
Okay.
Yes. I like this ship too.
Did not the Defiant appear in other series as well?
No, but briefly in Nemesis, yes, at the beginning of Nemesis.
Okay.
When they beam Worf aboard and Riker turns to Worf and say, tough little ship. And Worf says, little ship?
Little ship. Yeah.
Favourite captain?
Picard.
Fair.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Favourite character?
Worf.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's the first time.
Absolutely Worf.
Which Worf? The TNG Worf?
Well, it doesn't matter because Worf is Worf throughout both TNG and DS9.
Well, there was another Worf. There was Worf's grandfather or great-grandfather.
Oh, yes, of
in,
course.
The Undiscovered Country.
And,
yes.
Of course, there was Judge Worf in Enterprise as well. When Archer was on trial he was put on trial in a Klingon court, and one of the
was it the same Klingon court that Kirk and McCoy got tried in?
Same kind of thing.
Yeah. I do remember that. Okay. Favorite storyline? This can be an arc, a single episode, or a segment from the film, or a film.
Best of Both Worlds, I think. Probably the end of season 3 and beginning of season 4 of TNG, where they go to a planet and they find that the colony has been literally scooped off the face of the planet. There's nothing left there, and they think it's the Borg. This is after Q sends them off to 7,000 light years. To meet the Borg for the very first time. At the end of that episode, Guinan and Picard are talking to each other and saying, as Guinan says, now that they know you exist, Picard says, they'll be coming.
Yeah.
And there was a whole season, almost a full season and a half, before the first episode of Best of Both Worlds. And they think it's the Borg that has done this colony in. And so there's Shelby, who's one of the commanders, has got some analysis of the damage that was done on the Enterprise back in Q-Who, and finds that it's the same signature, that's the same energy signature that's taken this colony off the planet. So they're convinced that it's the Borg. And it's the whole Locutus bit where, of course, the Borg are there to get Picard and turn him into Locutus to be the representative of the Borg for the assimilation of Earth. So it's that whole two-parter episode that I always go to. If I fancy a bit of TNG, I'll watch those 2 episodes.
Fair play to you.
I'm going to see that soon because I'm at season 3 of TNG, so...
Oh yeah, I think you'll love that.
Should be there soon. Well, I've seen them already, every episode, but I'm rewatching them now.
I'm working through the original series at the moment. I say working through, I've just started. So it'll be a while before I get to TNG. Yeah. Final question, favourite or best villain?
I would have to say the Borg again. I would like to have said Shran, because, I mean, even though he is a villain, I mean, he's a likable villain, but it has to be the Borg. I mean, when you first meet the Borg for the first time in Q-Who, when I first saw that on my little tiny black and white television, it sent shivers down my spine. Probably thinking, yeah, there is a species, maybe a species out there that's like that, who are mechanical in some way. It's a spin-off from the Cybermen from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Cybermen always used to scare me stupid when I was tiny. It was never the Daleks. I was never scared of Daleks. It was the Cybermen that really freaked me out. And so having the Borg introduced into TNG just kind of brought all that back to me, I think, maybe when I was in my 20s. And, it was, the Borg, definitely.
Excellent. Well, thank you for those. We're still working on the idea of publishing everybody's responses to these on a dedicated page on the site. I'll might try and work on that this weekend. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, you may be able to visit that page on the site, but it might take a bit longer.
Yeah, because I'm busy this weekend. Next weekend it's a camp. And,
exactly.
So we're gonna have a busy few weeks coming up. Well, I guess that concludes our rapid fire questions. Thanks to everyone who downloaded our previous episodes. I said that every week, but it's really great that you actually spend some time with us. We just broke a milestone. Was it today or yesterday when we actually had we passed the 300 downloads of our show. So thank you very much.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Our podcast can be found everywhere. Pretty much now, I guess. We're like the Borg, and we spread. Resistance is futile. We're coming. If there's somewhere, a place where you get your podcast and you cannot find us, please let us know, and we're going to do whatever is in our power to get there. Also, help us spread the word by sharing the show on social media, talking about it at work during your meetings, sticking a post-it with a magnet at the cafeteria, etc., etc. And if you are so inclined, leave us a nice review in your podcast app.
So you can visit our website at tearlgreyhot.org, and don't forget that you can leave comments at the bottom of any of the pages that are on there, particularly relating to the episode that you are listening to right now, which is episode 8, Awakening.
And you can also send us an email. The address is feedback@tearlgreyhot.org, and we read absolutely everything. And if it's a comment or something that is worth reading on the show, then we will do that, unless you tell us that you don't want us to.
And we're on the social networks, well, the ones that are left at least. We're on Twitter and Facebook. Our username there is TEGH Podcast. And we're also on Telegram. You can come and chat to us at absolutely any time. You can find us over at t.me/TEGH Podcast.
We're also on Mastodon, and we use the mastodon.social instance. So you can find us at mastodon.social/TEGH podcast.
As always, thank you very much indeed to Memory Alpha. We have based our review of this week's episode on their work, which is released under a Creative Commons by attribution non-commercial license.
The rest of this show, unless otherwise stated, is released under a Creative Commons by attribution share-alike license, which means you can do pretty much whatever you want with it, as long as you credit us as the original authors. And if you publish something based on this episode, you have to release it under the same license.
This podcast is a part of the Other Side Podcast Network. You can find more of our phenomenally good shows over at otherside.network.
Absolutely. Next episode will be a review of Enterprise Episode 9, Kirshara, plus our usual fortnightly news roundup. Well, thanks, Ro, for joining us on this episode. It was great to talk to you again after many years since we last spoke.
It has. It's been a very long time. So, thank you very much for having me on the show.
You're welcome. And as we said, you will come back because, we have been chatting a lot, so we didn't have time to actually talk about yourself and your relation to Star Trek and all those things. So definitely you will be back on the show. But in the meantime, where can people find your podcast and things about you?
Yeah, well, my podcast is a music podcast, all hard rock and metal. You can find everything that I do over at darkcompass.com. Also on Twitter as at Dark Compass, over on Mastodon at R0C, over on the Mastodon social instance, and of course over at Facebook, Dark Compass page is where you can find me there.
Nice. Lots of way to contact you then. So that's great. Well, that takes us to the end of this episode. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Ciao, ciao.
See ya.
Ta-ra.
You've been listening to a member of the Other Side Podcast Network. Find more about our shows at otherside.network.